awful and foul. Remember back in the day when movies used to be good? Remember when action movies actually had action in them?
Wait, but this is back in the day.
Yeah.
You know, romance movies that was surprising and wonderful? This didn't have any of that.
What?
But it absolutely did.
But it's like the definition of back in the day, too.
The actors don't even try to give it their best. You look in their eyes and all you see is what they're planning on buying with their huge paychecks.
Did they even get paid that much for this film?
That could be any movie also.
Oh, this is true. George Clooney's like, I showed up, paid me.
Yeah.
That was a 1-star review on IMDb. Hello there, and welcome to Spoilers Intended, a podcast about series and films. I'm your host, Andrew, joined as always by Ryan.
I'm all hopped up on cold medicine and ready to talk about Zorro.
And Steven.
It's true. I watched him down a bottle before we got down here.
Slash.
Just pop that NyQuil top off and start chugging. Wait, no, NyQuil. Oh, no.
I've been flipping around ropes. It's been crazy.
This week we are discussing the fictional epic, The Mask of Zorro from 1998.
Fictional.
This isn't
just in case
historic?
anyone believed that this happened in real life.
I did. No,
Well, we can't say historical because it's not historical.
It's placed in a
we could
time.
It is
say
placed in a time period.
It is.
That could be historical.
It could have happened.
Yes.
It's alternate timeline.
So The Mask of Zorro is starring,
Multiverse, if you will.
Anthony Hopkins, Antonio Banderas, Catherine Zeta-Jones, Stuart Wilson, and Matt Letcher. And
The last one's important.
it is. So yeah, Mask of Zorro. That's what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
But before
There
we
it
get
is.
to it, we are going to talk about villains that are so good you love to hate them.
Yeah.
So just for a spoiler, if you haven't seen this movie, it's got some good villains.
Yes, it has two
And
fantastic
that is
villains.
weird.
That
Really
are,
hateable villains.
They're very hateable.
Perfect foils for our protagonists. So I want to talk about some other fictional villains that do a great job at making you hate them.
Shoot. Okay, hold on. No, just kidding. Mark Hitler off that
Mine is Andrew. No.
So yeah, I wanna hear what you guys have picked.
Okay, you want me to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to go with Joaquin Phoenix's portrayal of Commodus from Gladiator.
That's a good
Ooh,
one.
That is a real good one.
He's one of those villains, right? Where thanks to Joaquin's performance, the faces he makes can make his face is so punchable in that movie. And like the things he does, but the smug, like when he's doing the thumbs down, you know, it like drives me up the wall. Like I want nothing but bad things to happen to him. And it's the whole movie. And,
Well,
you
and
know.
it's so satisfying when bad stuff does happen to him in the end.
Yeah.
Because he
Always.
definitely does get his comeuppance, but
He
it
deserves
takes
it.
a while, and he does some terrible things in between there.
But he's so arrogant and so spoiled, and he just like, I don't know, that character is just so easy to hate for me.
Oh, he's got that face too. Like he just
Yeah.
kind of turns and looks at you and just like, yeah, I really want to punch you.
I know.
You haven't said a word.
Like
yet.
he's not one of those villains where you have like that redeeming, like, well, I can kind of see where he's coming from his perspective.
Yeah.
No,
No.
not at all. Like very easily, a hateable villain
Yeah.
to me.
Steven, what about you?
So I went with a character played by Imelda Staunton.
Okay.
This is the one and the only Dolores Umbridge
Ooh.
from the Harry Potter series.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, this is probably one of my most, and honestly, the internet's most hated villain out there.
Maybe not the internet, but
The
definitely
internet hates on her pretty hard.
definitely the fantasy.
the Potterverse.
Yeah, the Potterverse for
fans,
sure.
Potterheads.
Yeah.
I don't know.
She's a lot like Commodus. She's got that attitude.
Voldemort's a kitty cat compared to Dolores.
Well, the thing that gets me with her character, right, is she's, and I double checked myself like 4 times on this. So I feel fairly confident in saying this. She's never actually a Death Eater. She's never actually a Voldemort
follower.
supporter.
Yeah.
She's just taking advantage of what power she can get from whatever avenue she can get it, and she's all in for herself. She's also an incredible racist, and so she hates mudbloods, right? Muggle-born magic users, and also half race. So, for instance, the Centaurs, which again has its own play later in the films and books. But yeah, she's just, man, like everything about her attitude, because she's kind of like that that horrible person from HR that you just can't get off your back.
Well, she's got that like
But just
50s like Stepford Wives look
Oh yeah,
with her
like
outfit
pure
and
all the
stuff.
pink and fluffy, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, this is like a Barbie. If Barbie had like spikes radiating out of her at every angle, right?
Yeah.
Well, and she is so bureaucratically frustrating.
Yes. Oh man, it's so. Oh, she's the worst.
Yeah, she is definitely. I remember reading the books when I was younger, like I think 8th grade, 9th grade.
I was gonna say last year, but
And it was like she was definitely one of those characters when I was reading it. I was just like, I want to punch this girl in
she's
the
so
face.
she's so
punching the book.
frustrating. Yeah. I hope you could feel this, Dolores.
All right, so I am going with another historical fiction from Man in the Iron Mask, Louis the 14th.
Oh.
which is Philippe's brother, also played by Leonardo DiCaprio, and he is very similar to Ryan's pick, where he's the most spoiled, bratty kind of just
Always gets his way.
narcissist. Always gets his way.
Yeah.
He does a very good job at just making you just despise him. And when he does get his comeuppance in the end of the film, it is very satisfying.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I've seen that film.
Yeah,
actually.
I don't want to give away too much because there are some spoilers and some good twists that kind of happen
along the
throughout
way.
the film.
Yeah. Andrew just ruined the whole movie. You just don't know it yet.
But I mean, all villains always generally lose at the end.
You hope.
You would hope so.
Generally, how movies work.
But there's one bit where he is enamored with this girl, and he basically essentially separates her throughout, like in this kind of party.
Yeah.
And then he knows that he is that she's taken, and he sends her fiance to the front lines to get him killed.
So he's pulling like the whole David thing, King David move. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where like that happens really early on in the film, and it really solidifies how terrible of a person he is, just because he wants this mistress, where he has any other
pick of the litter, right?
Any other lady in the kingdom can be his, but he wants that one. Yeah. So let's move on to The Mask of Zorro.
Yep.
That was a pretty quick opening
we
topic.
moved off of the Man in the Iron Mask to the Mask of Zorro.
So
perfect transition.
Well, they actually both came out pretty much around the same time.
Almost right on top
Oh yeah,
of each other.
because it was like 98 for Mask of Zorro.
Yes.
It is.
And
Iron Mask was probably like
Keep going.
96.
I got it.
so the basically after Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves with Kevin Costner came out.
Yeah.
Oh, same
And
year. Both 98.
Both 98? Okay.
So yeah, whenever that came out and it was success, you have a lot of these other swashbuckling films that kind of cropped up a couple years later, because we're like, oh, we could do some historical fiction and give it the big budget and kind of bring out some older heroes and tales and whatnot, and kind of do that. And they did a fantastic job with Mask of Zorro. And let me get you the plot summary here, if it would. I looked up something else, and now I have to go pull back up. There we go. So here we go. The synopsis is: after being imprisoned for 20 years, Zorro, Don Diego de la Vega, Anthony Hopkins, receives word that his old enemy, Don Rafael, has returned. Don Diego escapes and returns to his old headquarters, where he trains aimless drunk Alejandro Murrieta to be his successor. Meanwhile, Montero, who has secretly raised Diego's daughter, Elena, as his own, hatches a plot to rob California of its gold.
I don't know if you really say it's rob California, but we'll get into that later.
Yeah.
Get into that later.
So this came out, 1998, directed by Martin Campbell, the same director that did GoldenEye, which we have reviewed, that you can go listen to right now. After this episode.
Part of the 007 doubleheaders.
Listen to both simultaneously if you're that good.
Oh, man, yeah.
Well, so he
Sure
he was asked to direct Tomorrow Never Dies, and
might have been a better film if he'd accepted.
Well, it might have been a better film, but he declined because he wanted to make Mask of Zorro.
Or he looked at that script and was like, yeah, no, I'm good with what I got.
It was directed by Martin Campbell. Music was done by James Horner, who is known for Titanic, Avatar, American Tail, and this film.
Yeah.
Does a lot of stuff, worked with James Cameron for a long time.
Yep. Then director of photography, Phil Mayhew? Mayhew?
Mayhew?
Well, it's French.
Oh, Lord. Who
knows? Yeah.
But he was the director of photography for GoldenEye and Casino Royale. And so this film had a budget of $95 million in 1998 money.
That's pretty steep.
It is. That's a pretty high budget, and it made $250 million global, 94 million domestic. So it basically made its production budget back, and then 156 million international, which basically made up for everything else.
Right. Yeah.
And so definitely considered a success for sure. And I'm kind of curious of what you guys thought about this film, because this is one of my personal favorites. Like, I'll just kind of throw it on whenever. It's just a great film.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to have it on the background.
Yeah.
I mean, I love this movie. It's been a long time since I've seen it. I remember I did not see it in theaters when it came out, but I remember renting it pretty quickly, like after, when it was a new release.
Back in the 90s, it took a little while for things to get out of the screen and onto a VHS.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I loved it back then. And it's, I want to say my wife and I watched it maybe like 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Maybe 10 years. It's, it all blurs together. But like a while back. And I remember liking it then. But watching it this time, I had forgotten so much about it, even in that time.
Oh, it makes it even a great watch then.
It's basically, to me, like almost like the perfect kids movie in some ways, in that like there's a lot of swashbuckling, a lot of action. None of it's violent. There's a lot of slapstick comedy. There's a lot of like bordering on Looney Tunes moments. You know what I mean? And a lot of the stuff that's happening. And
it's a really good mix of action and comedy.
And this is Antonio Banderas after Desperado, which was the first thing I think I ever saw him in.
Yeah.
And everybody, Anthony Hopkins does good in this movie. Catherine Zeta-Jones does good in this movie. I'm not sure the actor's name, but the guy that plays
Captain Love.
Matt
Lesher.
Yeah, Matt Lesher. Great at just being that just like quintessential. I mean, I could see someone complaining that he's like very two-dimensional. There's not a lot of depth to it, but I don't care. For this type of pulp, swashbuckling, story.
He's perfect for it.
Perfect, yeah. And so I think as long as you go into this movie knowing that it's an updated version of those types of swashbuckling tales of the early
like Princess Bride style.
Well, it's definitely got a lot of the same feel as your original Indiana Jones trilogy.
It does.
And like The Rocketeer has the same kind of feel.
I kept thinking of that.
Yeah, like those movies all could almost be like same universe, different characters kind of thing.
Like when we finished watching it, I was like, I miss movies like this.
Yeah.
Like we don't get action movies like this.
It's just an action blockbuster that it knows exactly what it is, and it has fun doing it with good production value. And the best part about it is that this was done at a time before CGI really became prevalent.
Yeah.
So everything is practical.
Yep.
And it adds so much more tactileness to the film.
It sure does. So speaking of practical, I'm going to name drop someone you didn't name drop in your summary.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, so this is a Bob Anderson film.
Okay.
So Bob Anderson has done every sword fight choreography and every movie that has sword fight choreography worth watching. So that's Star Wars. That's we'll get the dubious one out of the way. Highlander, including the TV series.
It's not dubious. They're really good sword fights in that.
They do have good ones, but the series as a whole is a little.
Well,
you can't deal with that quality.
He's sitting there going, "Hey, the sword fights were good. You guys wrote it.
Yeah.
It's not my problem anymore.
I did the sword fights. Those worked great."
But Princess Bride, all the Lord of the Rings movies, the first Pirates of the Caribbean,
which absolutely shows.
If there is an iconic sword fight,
he's done
up
it.
into about the mid 2000s. It was Bob Anderson, almost guaranteed.
Wow.
So I'll go ahead and
that.
drop one of my trivia that I have.
All right.
So legendary sword trainer Bob Anderson,
Nailed it.
who trained Errol Flynn. Errol Flynn remarked that Antonio Banderas was the most gifted swordman with whom he had ever worked with since Flynn. Banderas also trained with the Spanish Olympic team for 4 months for this role.
Oh wow!
Yeah, he worked hard for this one.
He also insisted very much that he wanted to do as much, if not all, of his stunts that he was allowed to do for himself,
which makes a big difference.
Yeah, which added more to authenticity and whatnot. Like, and it makes such a big difference for this film because there's some good stunts in it. There's some fantastic action sequences.
Well, there are some really good shots where when you watch like a modern action film, right, where it would be over the shoulder, quick cut, over the shoulder, quick cut, over the shoulder, quick cut. But for these sword fight sequences, there's a lot of times where they kind of pull the camera back just a little bit middle zone.
And they're just like,
and
hey,
they
look at
leave
this.
It's a very Jackie Chan-esque feeling where they're just like, hey, I want you to see the whole scenery and every single swing of these swords as these two guys go at it.
I think that's one of the things that surprised me the most. I think was like watching it this time was like, I don't remember picking up on the fact that they did that. They just leave the camera and you see all this action.
Well, and from my understanding is what they would do is they actually still did a lot of, like, I'll say, like, longer single shots, and the only time that they would really cut in between those, because they do the fight multiple times, obviously, at different camera angles, is just to punctuate the scene and not because the actors couldn't actually perform
Like
the
they had
whole
to stop
set
it
of
midway or
choreography.
something.
Yeah. And it makes such a big difference because the film has some phenomenal action set pieces, but it also has some great swordplay in it. Just because, Bob Anderson, one, is a fantastic choreographer and trainer, but the people that were doing it really cared about it.
Yeah. And you can tell, like...
Yeah, I mean again, Banderas put 4 months of fencing training into this. That's a pretty hefty commitment in and of itself.
Trying towards like the middle of the movie, towards the end when the sword fights are really happening, to see like, is that a stunt man? Like, it's very easy to cover up if it was sometimes because he's wearing a mask.
Right, yeah.
But like a lot of times it looked like it was him. And so now that I know that about his training, he probably was doing it.
He was doing
majority of the time.
Most of it. I want to say probably like 80% would be like definitely obviously none of the stuff when he's doing like action stuff on the horse.
Also, I imagine there's some stuff with the horse riding and like the actual like stunt jumps. That are not him.
And I think that's where a lot of the limitation comes in, but pretty much all the sword fighting, as far as I know, that was him.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
We've already kind of gushed about the film. It has some fantastic music by James Horner.
Oh yeah, the music's great. Like I think the costuming, the set design, like all that is really good. It definitely does have that like 1998 feel sometimes, but not in a bad way.
It's got a little cheese to it, maybe, in the way the sets are designed and kind of like the over the top, like, hey, if this is gonna explode, it's gonna explode.
The lighting in a lot of scenes is like really well lit. You know, like it's like this is not natural looking.
It's very pulp feeling.
My wife definitely made a comment of, hey, look, it's a sequence taking place at night where we can see everything. Isn't it nice? I was like, it's
very
actually
nice.
pretty nice.
Yeah. So one thing that I found really interesting was Alejandro Murrieta, who is Antonio Banderas' character. Murrieta was actually a historical figure, not Alejandro, but Joaquin Murrieta was a historical figure, and he is widely believed to be the inspiration for the original literary character of Zorro.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's kind of a nod back to that, like, I guess origin is what you would call it.
Well, I thought it was interesting because I was looking up like the Wikipedia and like the original Zorro from like the pulp stories and the old black and white show. His name was Don Diego de la Vega.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's almost like Mission Impossible when they did the movies. It was like, we're going to have Ethan Hunt be our new hero. But like, John Voight's character or whatever was like the old
Jim Phelps, I think.
Phelps, yeah.
And that was very much a trend in the late 90s to bring back some of these older heroes as retired heroes.
Torch.
Yes.
So it's interesting because I was thinking about that, right? As a kid, when I grew up, we had like the old Zorro reruns, right? We had this movie came out. We kind of ignore Legend of Zorro. It happened. That's nice.
Yeah.
But that was like, what, 05?
That was 05, yeah. But like thinking about it now, it's interesting how much a character like Zorro is not really so much in like the cultural conscious.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's not a character that comes up like, here's a new, I don't know, maybe there is a Zorro line of comics. I don't know.
Yeah.
But like you just don't see it, like a Sunday paper, people talking about, oh, they're going to remake the next Zorro. They've tapped, this director, or whatever.
I think that it would be more likely to be in the consciousness if the Lone Ranger movie hadn't done so
poorly.
Yeah, really poorly.
Yeah. Because, I mean, in this movie, basically you have some white actors playing in Hispanic roles, So it is a product of its time in 98. Like Anthony Hopkins. Yeah. The least Hispanic sounding dude on earth with the bluest eyes ever. It's just like walking around.
Same thing with Stuart Wilson, who plays, oh my gosh, the main bad guy. Don Raphael.
Don Raphael, yeah.
Yeah, he's just an English actor.
I mean,
Right.
now, to some extent, though, if you need someone to play like a Castilian Spanish, that's
Sure.
just white. Like at the end of the day, that's not
Right.
what we think of nowadays
Yeah.
as a Hispanic.
Right.
That's more of a blending or over time thing that's
Yeah.
occurred.
Yeah.
So like saying, oh, well, they brought in, because I thought about that when it first came. I was like, oh yeah, Anthony Hopkins was this guy. It's kind of weird, and I was like, oh, it's not that weird, I guess. It's still odd to not. I mean, they at least have Banderas here.
Yeah,
like, we got,
right,
we got
yeah,
a real
yeah.
Spanish speaker for this, at least. Okay. all
I
right.
do like that, like, at multiple points in the movie, they're speaking English and someone speaks Spanish and they have to have it translated to them. And I'm like, you're from Spain and you're in Mexico or you're in California. Like, you're near,
Yeah.
like, all that. The lady at the market with the flowers.
Oh, so I interpreted her to be more like she is like Indian descent as opposed to speaking Spanish. So
Oh,
she's
really?
speaking like a different,
Like a different dialect.
yeah,
Maybe I didn't
just
catch
a different
that.
language entirely.
I had this moment where I thought she was speaking Spanish and they were like, what? And I'm like, hold on.
Because I was listening to some of what she was saying. I was like, I don't know what she's saying, and of course, they don't give you subtitles because it's meant to
Right.
be unknown.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's how I was interpreting it at the time. I don't know how accurate that is for
It
what
might
they,
be it,
what they
yeah.
wanted. I don't know. Yeah.
So I have a question, which we ask every time.
Yeah.
Would you recommend it, and would you rewatch it?
Absolutely.
I would absolutely recommend this. I had this thought throughout the entire time of watching it of like, I want to show this to my nephew so bad.
Yeah.
Because I guarantee he hasn't seen it. And again, like when I say this is like a perfect kids movie, is like there is death in it.
Yeah.
But like nowhere near the
It's
death I saw when I was a
relatively
kid.
bloodless.
I was
Well,
watching
yeah,
Die
it's-
Hard at 5.
It's,
You know,
it's
like,
pretty bloodless when they like do like stabs or whatever. It just passes through and you move on for the most part.
For the most part. Like
Yeah.
there are like
Yeah.
maybe like one or two like actual gruesome deaths in here, but it's more implied.
it's more. I mean, like there's a float. You know, there's like body parts.
I mean, there's a floating.
There's a floating
There's a
head.
floating head in
Yeah.
a jar. There's things that are like gross and off-putting, but it's never like to the point that I would be like,
Yeah,
oh,
it's too
children can't
graphic.
watch this.
It's not like gratuitous sprays of
Well,
blood or that kind of thing.
So I
Yeah.
remember like whenever this came out, I was 8th grade ish, somewhere around there. And my mom loves this film.
Yeah.
And we would just throw it on at any point in time. Like it didn't matter for at least my parents. They let me watch it because they were just like, yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, we want to watch it, so he's just going to be here. you
Yeah.
know, whatever.
But yeah, I mean, I would also recommend it and definitely rewatch it.
I mean, I would rewatch it just for Catherine Zeta-Jones. She's an absolute smoke show in this film. Holy smokes.
I mean, so this was like the role that really got her famous because then I think after this she did Entrapment, if I remember correctly.
Entrapment
that
was like
sounds right. Entrapment
98.
was
I think the
like-
same year.
Yeah.
Was it 98?
It was close to it. If it wasn't,
It was around there.
Yeah.
But from my understanding, this was what really like put her on the map.
Yeah,
as
Entrapment's
an actress.
99, so it's the next set.
Yeah, it's the
basically.
next.
Well, it was funny because we were rewatching it the other night, and like every time Antonio Banderas comes on screen, my wife would go, and every time Catherine Zeta-Jones would come on screen, I'd go,
I mean, Antonio Banderas is a very handsome man.
Like there's something
man.
for everybody in this movie. Is what I'm trying to say.
But well, especially if you want to crank back with something that's a little more, I don't want to call it because it's not subdued. It's not the term I'm looking for, but it's more.
It's simpler.
It is simpler.
It's easier to follow
It's
than a lot
little-
of the
it's a little bit
convoluted
more
plots.
of-
Yeah.
the plot's not as convoluted, but also kind of like the ideals and the people in play are a little simpler.
Yeah.
And
like it knows exactly what it is.
It's
Yeah.
very much so that pulp fiction feel of kind of like we've got swords and fists and we're just gonna make things happen.
Yeah.
The way I would think of it too is like it reminded me of like back in like the 90s and 98 and like 90 whatever 2 or 3 for the Rocketeer. Like you could have these simpler movies that were still executed really well. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas nowadays I feel like a lot of times when it's a simpler movie or a kids movie or not that this is a kids
People
movie, but, like,
lambast it because they're like, it's not complicated
Well,
enough.
they-
It's
well,
not the Dark Knight.
But on top of that, they phone it in, and there's plot holes everywhere because they're like, "Who cares? Whatever." It's just this. It's like a throwaway.
We're not making that kind of movie, kid.
right. Yeah, and like that's how they treat it. Whereas back here, this could have very easily been the same thing, where they just didn't care about plot holes. But it's like perfectly competent. It's simpler. It's not as convoluted as other stuff, but it's really well done.
Well, they approached it. They took it seriously, but the result you have on screen isn't necessarily always serious. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they were very serious about the craft involved.
Yes.
Which we already talking about. Banderas spending 4 months training for this. So like everyone involved, I think really like knuckled down. I was like, if we're gonna make this kind of film, we're gonna make the best
Yeah.
version of it we can, kind of thing. So
Yeah.
we've been talking about one character famous for leaving his mark. If you want to know how we've left our mark, check out spoilersintendedpodcast.com.
That was not where I thought this was going.
No, I was like, where is this gonna go?
You can go there to see things like all of our great prior content,
Yeah.
links to our Discord, Patreon, and our socials.
And on our Discord, we have a great number of channels that you can go check out. What we're listening to, what we're watching, what games we're playing.
Hobbies.
We also have hobby channels. What's cooking? You know, what'd you eat tonight? Five Guys? I don't
Something
know.
cool?
Show us your pets.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah, pets are cool too.
Yeah.
Seriously, yeah, get on Discord. I want to see your cats. I want to see your dogs.
Yeah.
Lizards,
We also
snakes,
have goldfish, whatever, man. We also have social media. We have 2 accounts. We got a Facebook and Instagram.
That's
We're keeping it simple for you. This is for you, not us.
It's just for you.
Yeah. We post a lot of fun stuff on there, and every week we post what we're going to be recording or reviewing rather the next week, so you can watch along with us.
And we are back from the spoiler wall that Stephen has so graciously scratched the S of our name into.
You're darn right.
It took him a long time, though. It wasn't like quick and cool.
It was
like,
really slow.
He really chipped at it for a while.
Grabbed that foil and kind of leaned into it like I was doing a chisel move. You know.
Okay, so before we get into the nitty gritty of all of our categories, let's talk a little bit of trivia. There's not too much trivia, so I'm going to try and hold a little bit I can. But one of the things that I found really interesting was Anthony Hopkins was very adamant that he wanted to use Zorro's bullwhip, which the director, Martin Campbell, did not want to use.
Really?
For various
Interesting.
reasons.
That's such an iconic
There's so
part
many
of the
bullwhip-centric
character.
scenes in this movie.
So Anthony Hopkins basically just forced him. He was like, "I'm going to do it, and whether you are going to do it or whether you want me to or not."
6 months training. I'm going to do it.
I was Hannibal Lecter. I'm using the whip.
Yeah. So he was very proud of the work that he did mastering the bullwhip and insisted they let him show it off a bit. So the scene in the cave where Diego is extinguishing the candles with the bullwhip, that's all Anthony
That's real?
Hopkins.
Really?
Yes.
Oh,
All
wow.
real.
That's crazy. I was actually watching that scene. I was like, I wonder if they hollowed out part of the candle so there's air going straight
No,
up.
Oh, I
through
thought
it
there
or
was like a
something,
production assistant on the ground just going, hoof, hoof, blowing them out.
That is all Anthony Hopkins, baby.
Wow.
That's cool.
Way to go.
And then, let's see, I got one more before we go.
So when they split his mask with the bull, was that also Anthony Hopkins?
Oh, gosh.
that was probably not.
Let's put your marquee Antonio Banderas out there. Just whoosh.
So this is actually a good segue into spectacle. So at the end, when Zorro confronts Captain Love, he pulls his sword out, and the sun glints off the blade.
yeah.
Running at full
Yes.
length. This was not CGI.
Sure.
This was suggested by Antonio Banderas. He had to tilt the sword to catch the sun without breaking eye contact
yeah.
with Matt Lesher.
And it had to hit the frame right, like
Yeah.
the lens just
Yeah.
right.
It only took 3 takes.
That's good.
Yeah, that's such
When
a
it
cool
happens and the
sequence.
music hits right when the
yeah.
lens flare hits, I was like,
go. Let's go.
Well, and
Yeah.
it's so because it's one of those things where it's like, you know, we've kind of hammered down now that it's very pulp.
Yeah.
That is exactly what you would think of.
Yeah.
Like in that kind of like pivotal
It's
scene.
such a comic book move.
and
Yeah.
it's so like over the top that you're just like, there's no way that's real.
Well, I rewound it
Yeah.
on that part because I was like, we didn't have good lens flare plugins in
Yeah.
1998.
It's great.
Yeah,
Like
it
it's
looks
just
good.
fantastic. So let's move on into spectacle,
Okay.
which I think is pretty fantastic. Someone start.
Yeah, I think definitely.
Andrew, please, anybody, someone. I'm
Yeah, like
begging you.
looking at the fight choreography, the swashbuckling, the action scenes, the swinging off of ropes and the whip.
I really like the rope. I'll say jungle gym or course.
Oh, yes.
that he has in
Yeah.
the training area. Man, that's fantastic.
Yeah, because like when you first see it, you're like, that looks inconvenient. Why are all these ropes everywhere? And then when you see him like bopping around, and jumping through them, you're like, oh,
Well, and I always love seeing that and then seeing the payoff
later.
Later, whenever he's trying to escape from the after stealing the map.
Oh yeah,
and he's like going up and around on the trees and everything. It feels great.
And he's doing the same angle, swing around.
Very much doing the gymnast moves.
Yeah.
I mean, again, like I said, the costuming, the sets, the where they shot it and stuff, everything looks really good.
Yeah.
And then, the action choreography. Again, I could say from a camera work and a lighting perspective, it is kind of rooted in the late 90s, and it's a little simpler than like GoldenEye. GoldenEye, I feel like, got a little more crazy with camera angles and stuff. But this ain't the movie for that. It's...
Well, yeah, because I think it's just a different feel.
It is, yeah.
Because like this, they were going for more of, I'll say, a comic book-esque style of storytelling, where like GoldenEye, you have a little bit more, I think, leeway with the James Bond franchise, because like it's a true action film, where this is a little bit more you're also trying to tell a story with it at the same time,
right?
And like a lot of that, you tell the story with the visuals.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, like at this point, you have these people who've trained this hard for it, and they're going at it. Like that sword fight scene in the hallway.
That's
a good one.
Between Captain Love and
Zorro.
Zorro.
But like that whole fight sequence, one is great, and two, they're like, hey, like the camera operator's like, so you want me to like move, like zoom in, zoom out? Like, no, leave it alone. Don't touch it. These guys are just going at it, right?
So,
like let that play out.
So the only thing that I have to say about that, and it's just kind of silly, is there are a couple times where Zorro will basically, he'll basically knock like Captain Love down, and then he'll continue fighting Don Raphael for like probably a good like 15 to 20 seconds, and then Captain Love comes back in.
Enough time for Love to get up and rise up.
But more than enough time.
Yeah.
Like he just kind of pushed him down, and then like they just kind of keep going, and it's like if Captain Love has like a lot of adrenaline going through him right now, he is out for blood. Like, what are you doing? Just like hanging out, looking at your watch, like
No, I will say,
but he's taking a breather. Maybe he got winded.
That's not a big
kicked
knock.
out.
It's just more of an observation, where it's just like this is very much that kind of like, I'm fighting you now, I'm fighting both of you now, I'm fighting one more,
just like in the pulp,
stories
and movies of ye olden times.
Well, and also to that point, like it can be really hard to just be like, hey, like my buddy's fighting this dude, they both have swords, and I'm just gonna wade into this fight when there's sword tips going everywhere. Like, you don't want to
like jump in and then like kill your buddy.
Right. Well, when we see
or yourself, I jumped in on a sword.
When we basically see this at the start of the film, right? When Don Vego's wife is shot. She enters into the fight, and it's not intentional.
Yeah.
So like it's the same kind of thing. Whenever I watch those scenes, it's like, like I don't blame Captain Love either. If these two are just going out with a sword, I might lay there for a second and be like, maybe Don will stick him a time or two, and then I'll get back in there. Maybe he'll wear himself out on the old man.
Yeah, because like there definitely is like you don't want to just rush in, but it was just more like I just always laugh
funny,
where he just gets knocked down, and then you're just like, oh, they're going for like a good 30 seconds, and now he's
back. You're like, wait, oh yeah.
Well, like we have like the gentleman's agreement where it's like, look, I'm gonna fight you, and then you. And then this third guy, and then I'll come back to you. Okay, I'm gonna get back to you. I promise.
It's not your turn.
Wait your turn.
Well, and they kind of do that with whenever he's standing on the table. In the center of like the of that courtyard.
Yeah.
And then like you just have people coming up and like he's knocking them down, and then another guy comes up, which I mean, like it's great. Like it's a great scene.
Yeah.
It's really exciting, and the music is great. And it really just hammers home like how much they cared about I'll say the clarity of like their story that they were telling.
Well, it's also fun, to watch this film, right? Set or made or released in '98. It's probably made in '97, '96ish, where there's basically no CGI at play. They did a lot of practical, and that includes things like blowing stuff up.
Like blowing up the entire mine.
Yeah, when we see this set and then it gets blown up, well, one, they built that, and two, they blew that up.
Yeah.
And that has its own, like, thinking about if that film were made today, right? All of that would be CGI. It would be Antonio Banderas on a green screen by himself.
Yeah.
And it would look terrible.
Which two things.
I hope you bring up what I think you're going to bring up.
The sound effects of the lions and the jaguars during all the explosions. Because it starts in the very intro of the movie, which also has some very cheesy, like,
that is CGI,
early Alpha Channel,
great.
like, they lit a green screen on fire and said, "Can you key that?" I don't know. We'll find out. And they put it on the Z. So the intro's like, woof. But then everything after that's great. But yeah, every explosion is
Yeah, do like the wildcat.
At one point, it's like, you're like, why?
You could have just like,
what a choice.
I'm sure there was a T-Rex in there somewhere.
Somewhere, yeah.
Yeah, you could just have the original. I do wonder, like, man, that Foley studio, they were losing their minds that day. Like, so what is fire sound like? I don't know, probably like a big cat.
The guy's like, we've got to finish this Foley today. Okay, all I brought was the tape of big cat sounds. Make it work.
I was gonna work on National Geographic on my lunch break, so just put it in there. We'll stretch it a little.
I can do this.
Yeah, it is pretty. Like, of all the things that don't fit well, like I can allow the cheesy intro because one, it's cheesy, and two, it's very over the top, right?
Yeah.
But when we're actually just blowing up a structure and just what are you doing? Who looks at that?
Well, it's like it's not
great.
one. It's like 4 or 5
of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it keeps going, and it's like,
yeah.
what do we do?
So speaking of the intro,
Yeah.
the visuals of it with the really hardcore backlight and Zorro walking like up to it with James Horner's kind of like Spanish tapping. I don't even know if like they're like what the
it's like a flamenco.
Yeah, like a flamenco style track. And him just like walking up with like the really hard shadows.
The red.
Oh, man, it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's like it really sets the tone for like the kind of film you're about to get into.
Yeah.
Well, then we also have like the classic comic book move, right? Where old Zorro in our cold open is, rears the horse up in the sun to ride out across the rooftop, question mark? Yeah, that was an interesting move.
That's a really heavy horse. I'm curious
horse.
if those
roofs weren't that good back then.
I know.
Well, see, what's funny is when I was looking at all that construction, I was like, I bet these things were like in that era, like those bunk beds in that fight scene. I was like, I bet those pieces of wood were some solid pieces of wood.
2,000 pounds.
Because you didn't have a choice, right? Like that was a heavy piece of furniture right there.
Yeah.
I mean, that horse was very strong.
Yes.
Yeah.
And to be fair, Spanish Andalusians are absolutely beautiful, magnificent creatures.
Yeah.
My growing up, my mom had a Andalusian Morgan, so it wasn't a true traditional Spanish Andalusian horse, but it was basically a mix.
Yeah.
And he had just as much personality as Tornado does in the film.
Did you ever try to jump off a building onto him or anything?
like whenever that happens, I can't blame the horse and be like, I don't want to catch you.
No, yeah, like it's gotta hurt.
The horse is probably smarter than you at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're the idiot thinking, I'm going to jump 20 feet and land on that horse. Balls first. It'll be fine. It'll be totally fine.
It's done.
Right on the saddle. No big deal.
Oh, man.
Yeah. A good, soft, hard leather saddle.
So, speaking of saddles, what was up with Captain Love's saddle? Did anybody else notice that? It was like leopard print or something.
Was it?
Oh,
like
yeah.
his saddle blanket. It was like leopard. And I was
It
like,
was weird.
I don't know if it's supposed to be like, he like
Big game
killed
hunts
big game or something like that, or what?
Or it could be maybe something Native
Just
American.
whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
It was very bizarre every time I saw it, though. I was like, man, why has he got this leopard print thing going on?
Well, while we're speaking on Captain Love, his long revolver that he has.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I don't know what kind of revolver that is, but it's like an extra long barrel.
I mean, presumably it's just like a Colt or something.
yeah,
from
with
that
just like a
era.
really long.
It's just a
It is
Colt extra
long-
large.
like
Yeah.
like a Navy Colt or something. I don't know. Actually, the Navy's probably shorter. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Well, let's move on to the performance.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I think Anthony Hopkins is probably my favorite in this film.
Yeah.
One, he does a fantastic performance, good and emotional whenever, it calls for it, especially whenever he's talking to Elena, particularly in the stables and he meets her for the first time again.
Oh, yeah.
That is just brutal because, like, all of us, we all know the
context.
backstory and the context of it. And it is just heartbreaking, seeing this father, come to terms with the fact that she is still, quotation marks, his daughter, but not his daughter anymore.
Yeah. No, like Anthony Hopkins, I think is good in just about anything he's ever been in.
Yeah.
Like even when he's like phoning it in, quote unquote, and just
Like
being
in like the Transformers Dark or the Last Night or something.
Yeah, I don't even remember him being in that, but I didn't see that one, I guess. But yeah, he still probably does perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Because if he's just Anthony Hopkins, it's going to work.
He's just a phenomenal actor.
But he really commits in this one. He
does.
He does really good. And I like that you can see like the emotion on his face both when he's like the younger version of himself and older, of just like the conviction and the hatred.
Oh yeah.
But then like when she's like drop it, and he drops his sword, you can just see like in his expressions like the turmoil he's going through.
Yeah. Interesting fact just on Anthony Hopkins. Whenever he was impersonating the butler for the gala or party or whatever that they were at,
Bernardo or whatever. Yeah.
So that is essentially the original butler that Zorro would dress at, or like basically go in disguise as in the original pulp comics.
Oh, really?
And Zorro and the butler were essentially like early inspiration for Batman and Alfred.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's kind of the
proto Batman.
Which there's some dispute about that, and there's always, when you get far enough back, there's always some.
Yeah.
But like watching Zorro is like, yeah, this is just
it's just
Spanish Batman. Yeah, from the 1800s or whenever.
Yeah.
Like it very much so has that feel of like, well, he's a very rich, landed lord
with the bat cave,
with a secret cave next to a waterfall.
Yeah.
It's not like
that fights the villainy that in his class.
The
and,
oppression.
Yeah. But yeah, what about you guys? I talked about Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah, and I mean we've already discussed. The villains are very good. Stuart Wilson and
Matt Letcher.
Matt Letcher, both do good. I want to give a shout out to Antonio Banderas because I think this is, again, fairly early in his career. Like he had done a few movies.
Yeah.
So he was 36 when he did this.
Oh, really?
And he was supposed to be playing. So
I would have pegged him as younger.
27.
Yeah.
Well, so now Catherine Zeta-Jones is early 20s.
Yeah.
She's like a decade-ish younger.
Yeah. So she was 26. Filming this. She's supposed to be playing Elena, who's obviously 20.
Right.
For the actual story, but I don't think that really matters.
Yeah.
She basically looks almost ageless at this point. So.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Her and Salma Hayek.
Yeah, they
I don't know what happened there, but
what kind of milk are y'all drinking? Like, let me know. Yeah, but I thought she did really good too, Catherine Zeta-Jones, because this is probably the first thing I had ever seen her in.
Yeah, so she had done like TV roles, I think, but this was like her first really big
like breakout
movie role, and she did a fantastic job. And I always like go back to that scene with her and Anthony Hopkins while they're brushing the horse. Or they're brushing Tornado.
That's a very good one, yeah.
It's a great scene where you get to see kind of both of them, with some of their acting chops, and it's just pretty fantastic. And Antonio Banderas, particularly whenever he's talking with Anthony Hopkins for the first time, or like second time, kind of going through the emotions of like, having lost his brother, and just kind of like the anger and rage, is just like he does such a good job. Like no one phoned it in.
No, and again, I could see someone who's like, maybe if you went into this not understanding this is like a pulp action adventure.
I could see like, Matt Letcher's Captain Love is very
cartoonish.
Cartoon. Yeah. Like I'm evil to be evil, which is fine.
I just think if you meet this movie on its own terms, then everybody executed wonderfully.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because there's really no one that like I can point to that was a bad actor.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or did a bad performance. Everybody did great.
And I mean, for the most part, you almost could say that there's almost a little too much like overacting at points, where it's like they sold a little too hard.
Yeah.
But again, for what they're shooting for, which is kind of that pulpy feel, that just kind of fits.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of the same problem we had with Rocketeer of like, how do you grade somebody and how good their acting is when they're intentionally acting cheesy?
Mm-hmm.
Or like they're from the 30s or whatnot. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also, cool to see them play off each other. It's interesting to see like the transition of Antonio Banderas' character from kind of just the rogue, which even when he's like the bandit, right, up to no good, they're also pulling tricks, right? Like he's captured by the bounty hunter who's actually part of his gang kind of thing.
Yeah.
But like him when he's drunk and enraged, and like him and Hopkins kind of playing off each other as Hopkins just kind of like beats him up. It's just like, you just got beat up by a crippled old man. How are you going to go fight, a trained soldier?
Yeah.
But like, I really like their interplay between the two of them.
They have great chemistry.
They really went like, well, granted, where they need to. We have a lot of scenes, just the two of them talking to each other.
Yeah.
So if they didn't, the movie would really hurt for it. But I really enjoyed watching the two of them work with each other. Because Antonio Banderas is an actor I really liked, basically for his whole career. Same thing for Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah.
So it would be disappointing to kind of go back, like, oh, let's go with the Wayback Machine. Be like, boy, Banderas, he's come a long way. You know, I'd be like,
no, they were great.
So
we have to talk about my favorite character.
Yeah.
Okay.
Three-Fingered Jack.
Ah, Three-Fingered Jack.
I love this guy. I love everything about him. Like when he gets shot jumping off the horse at the front, I'm like, oh, Jack. And then at the end, he's at this mine, and he's just like, I'm going out, and I will take you with me as I just spit your name. And he like flies and gets shot out of the sky again.
Yep.
I do love that Captain Love kind of drops the "if I had 2 nickels" line, or if I had a nickel for every time. He's like, it's the second time I've shot that man out of the air.
Yeah. But then you actually get like a decent little death scene with him when he's like looking.
And he sees Alejandro and
recognizes him and like has that moment of realization before he
Passes away,
crosses over.
Yeah.
Although I did think it really funny when he gets back, when Zorro, Banderas, gets back from that trip.
Yeah.
And he's like being contemplative in the Bat Cave, the Zorro cave, and he like peels off like stuck-on mustache. Like, dude, you already had
That's what I said.
that same facial hair. Like, couldn't they have just like let you trim that down and then you just shave clean shave? Like, that's
I'll tell you
such
what
a
happened.
weird
He probably
scene.
messed up doing it. Oh, and then he just had to shave it and put a fake one on.
Well, it's just weird for them to show him like reveal a stick-em mustache from like 1730 or whatever year this is set in. I don't know offhand.
Yeah.
1805. I don't know.
So speaking on a little bit on Matt Letcher, he admitted it was actually very hard to act against Antonio Banderas being the antagonist because he had him and Antonio got along so well.
Oh, no.
And that Antonio is such a genuine guy in real life that he had a hard time acting hatred towards him.
1810.
Let me tell you about my best friend.
See, all I could think about was it's not Desperados, I don't think. Maybe it's Once Upon a Time in Mexico. So it's the scene where Banderas is like backing down the church aisle shooting.
Yeah.
For that film, they couldn't get like real prop weapons past Mexican government. They were very hostile to it, so they were using like fake rubber guns basically. And so they had to reshoot it constantly because Banderas wanted to hear the guns.
Oh,
so he
and
kept
pew,
going,
pew, pew.
while he's doing that sequence. For some reason, midway through the film, that got stuck in my head. I don't know if it was an expression he made or what, and it's all I could think about for like half the film. So you're welcome. You can think about that now too.
That's funny.
One last bit, and then we can move on to score. So Anthony Hopkins initially refused the part for De La Vega.
Interesting.
Because he had back problems.
Oh, yeah.
And then he ended up getting an operation to allow him to do it. And he still did a decent amount of like sword work and,
I mean,
that
he
kind of stuff.
got that whip out, you know, like.
Yeah, I mean, props to him, right?
Well, like midway through the movie when they're doing the training and stuff, I'm like, wait a minute. I thought he was an old crippled man.
Yeah.
This guy's very capable.
Yeah. All right, so let's move on to score.
Yeah.
So James Horner did an absolute fantastic composition for this whole soundtrack. It's been on my rotation for decades at this point.
Again, it's been a long time since I watched this. I forgot how good the music was.
Well, and it's one of those things too where it's like I bet like even if you like had heard like some of that music like just in the wild in the wild, like you would recognize where it's from. It's very distinctive.
Yeah.
Or you'd be like, man, this sounds like something that could be in a Zorro film. Oh, it is. It is from Zorro. Oh, okay.
Right.
Well, like Ryan was saying earlier, when he does the sword glint and the music rises up, and you're like, yeah, this is basically everything I want out of this moment.
Yeah.
Like just, no notes, perfect.
Well, because you know that Captain Love is he is beaten and it's like he's about to get crushed by like 14 tons worth of gold.
Who knows? I love how that was the solution to the gold. Let's take the very heavy object and let's lift it. Well, just ride it out of there, guys. Like,
yeah, like it doesn't like it clearly like that whole like the way that mine and canyon is set up. Like, why did you have to lift it up? Like, couldn't you just like drive it?
Everybody else rode in on the road. Yeah, anyways,
that's more of a plot.
That's not
problem.
music related.
Yeah.
So I want to listen to what is the track? It is The Fencing Lesson.
The Fencing Lesson.
This has got a little bit of like stomping in it, I think.
Yeah. It takes a second for it to kind of build up, but this is probably one of my favorite kind of tracks.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So this is the one that opens like you're in a hipster bar in New York City somewhere.
then you get some of the
Us claps, not stomps. Yeah.
Yeah.
well, because this is when De La Vega is just schooling Antonio Banderas' character just wholeheartedly, like he's just like and slow.
Well, and it starts to pick up as the pace of the scene picks up.
Because this is essentially just the training montage for.
It's actually a little less montagey than I remembered.
Yeah.
I remember thinking, oh yeah, we have like multiple sequences, and it kind of just goes straight. It doesn't do like a bunch of cuts.
Yeah, it's more of a like you get like 2 training scenes,
two long sequences with like the. Was it him doing push-ups over the candle?
Oh yeah.
Well, with Anthony Hopkins
resting his feet on his back.
Yeah. Well, I love how when he's like, "Oh, it's very good. It's time for a drink." And so it's time for him to have a drink, not you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and
that's a good one.
The best part about it though is that all of this stuff, like, so whenever you watch like a Rocky montage, like you always you never really have callbacks to like the training techniques that happen. It's just him punching more stuff.
Just get that slab of meat out there and hit it.
I mean, I guess later he punches.
Yeah. So. But like these, like you have specific,
that's the setup.
You have specific callbacks to the techniques that he learned in training, because De La Vega knows like these are the kind of things you're going to kind of find yourself into, particularly when you're fencing.
Right, like in Rocky, we don't see him chase a chicken in the ring or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
got it. Yeah.
So let's move on to plot.
It's a bit more cerebral than that, Ryan. Come on now.
Is it more cerebral?
Or less
cerebral? I'm going with
more if you chase a real chicken in the ring.
Yeah.
I mean, the plot for this movie's, really straightforward. I don't really notice any major plot points.
No, I mean, like, the setup of the story of, like, what's going on is interesting because it's like, so here's this dude, he gets ousted or whatever, this revolution happens, and then he just comes back, like, 20 years later.
Yeah.
And everybody's like begrudgingly like, all right. And then he starts giving this speech on the beach, and like 3 sentences in, they're like, yeah, you know what? You got it. I miss this guy.
We're behind him. Yeah, you know. Forget how like decades ago he was just gonna kill people at random.
Right. And then I was like, well, how many of these people were around back then? I was trying to scan like
how old are you? Yeah.
How old are these people? Maybe it's all the young people like, yeah, wait, he's saying a lot of things that make sense.
Yeah.
This speaks to my interest. The other plot part that like it didn't bother me. It's never really explained, and maybe it's my lack of history of what was going on in California in 1810. But like, Colonel or the Captain, what's his name?
Captain Love.
What's he doing?
I mean, he's just
not in the military. He's just hanging loose here.
Yeah, he's just a soldier for hire.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like he was in the military.
He got out, kept wearing the uniform.
Well, probably still in it.
It's like quite possible that he's still in it.
Yes, it's possible that he basically, I'll say, was assigned to this section of the U.S.
Yeah,
and it's not the U.S. though.
Well, it's not the U.S., but like the frontier.
Yeah, the frontier. Yeah,
and effectively, he's just kind of a gun for hire.
Captain's pay isn't what it used to be.
But according to his superiors, he's just out there on standby,
just doing his stuff.
Well, but I tend to lean towards the idea that he was probably drummed out of the military for being a psychopath.
Yeah, probably.
And then what those skills are good for is you sell those skills
being
to other
a psychopath,
insane villains. Yeah. For me, the biggest issue in the plot that I see is so Don Raphael is essentially ousted by the people.
Yes,
20 years ago. Comes back. It's been 20 years, and he rolls up and he's like, "So we've got the gold mine, right?" It's like, who put that plan into motion and made those people like we needed the other guy,
Captain Love.
The other
Captain
dude.
Love. We need the other Don that he like relies on. I presume
Don Luis, the one he gave all the deeds.
Deeds to. That was like it was like in the plan. Like here's the deeds. There's gold in them hills. Put the people to work. I don't know. I just would have liked a little more in there where we could figure out like maybe that's why he put on the big show in the public square at the start because he's like, well, I need to get rid of Zorro. Because Zorro could foul up my long-term planning out here that I've got where I'm stealing gold at the time, not from Santa Ana, but from the Spanish government. I don't know.
You see those scenes where
little more of that.
He gets Don Luis to go get the thing out of the secret compartment when Anthony Hopkins is snuck in there as the butler. So like clearly Don Luis is like he's
been doing stuff behind, but
we're just never communicating what he's doing.
A scene or like a letter on a desk or just anything, just a little more.
So the only other problem that you kind of run into is you do actually have to have a pretty good understanding of basically the the Spanish Revolution,
The politics
and the
at the time, or the
politics
Mexican
for Santa
Revolution,
Ana and the
Right.
Spanish government and Texas and like all these other like and like why California was an independent republic or like trying to
Or
become
could
one,
be, yeah.
and those kind of things, and like those are never really explained in any kind of overt detail in the film.
Right.
So if you don't have any like familiarity with it, it'll be kind of confusing.
I have no familiarity with it, and I was a little confused.
Yeah.
But not enough to like
No,
detract
like it doesn't
from the
really
movie or
detract
anything.
from it because it's still like this. The revenge plot line and the
Is the
redemption
core,
is the
yeah.
core, and
Yeah.
then all this stuff is kind of tertiary. Like those are just the reason stuff is happening and why our bad guys are bad guys.
Well, also,
Right.
I like seeing in the plot kind of the evolution of Alejandro as a character, where he's going from his initial motivation is revenge. I'm going to kill that man.
Yep.
And that's sum total of my life objectives.
Right.
Two, he sees the suffering of the people. Now he wants to help the people. Like,
Yeah.
like it builds up, right? Like you actually have
An arc.
a real development there, as
Yeah.
opposed to just being. Yeah, I like the mask. The mask got me the hot woman, and I stabbed a dude.
And I got my revenge.
I think I'm gonna keep doing this. You know, it seems to be working out.
Yeah.
You know, like there's more there. So
Well, yeah, because at the end of the film, like you really do feel that he is Zorro.
He is
And,
Zorro,
yeah,
yeah.
and not essentially a stand-in for what De La Vega stood for,
or
as
just
Zorro.
or
Yeah.
just that he's purely De La Vega's puppet. Right?
Yes,
he's just
yeah,
doing
yeah.
what
Yeah.
De La Vega wants, right? Yeah. So I enjoyed that part of it a
Yeah.
lot, where we actually see him kind of build up as a character and grow as a person, essentially.
Yeah.
While he's in the guise of the worst version of himself, which is the like the noble, the young noble guy, who I don't remember what he done something or other. I can't remember.
It's probably still just Alejandro, honestly.
It
Like,
may be actually. They just kind of they like that name. They stuck with it. Like, you know what? You can't screw that up.
Yeah.
It's not in the IMDb. It's just
Yeah.
His
Well, I
name
mean, because that's
Zorro.
just his disguise.
Yeah, it's just a disguise. But whoever he is as that character,
yeah.
Yeah. The only other thing that always kind of I'm not going to say it even bothered me. It was just something that always crosses my mind of like how like I mean because Captain Love is very cartoonish when it comes to like he is evil to be evil.
yeah,
And-
you don't really get a good motivation. He just kind of likes killing people.
Yeah, he's just
Right.
presumably.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like the horrors of war drove him to madness. And
maybe
he's
it
like,
did.
Now
We
he's
just
a
don't get it.
psychopath because
So-
he's seen too
so
much
this
and
is
lost
what-
too many friends or something.
See,
yeah.
this is what happens. This is what a cavalry officer becomes when he isn't captured by the natives.
Right.
Yeah, I was
in,
gonna say-
He just
Last
snaps.
Samurai.
Yeah, I was gonna say this is just Nathan Algren, but he didn't get captured.
The bad
Right.
coin, the bad coin flip of Nathan Algren, not the
Yeah.
good coin flip. Yeah,
Nathan Algren from The Last Samurai, for those
for to be more
unclear.
specific.
Yeah.
yeah,
Sorry.
which we have an episode.
We do.
We do. It'll likely be out before this one. Question mark?
Probably.
This is why we're referencing. We did watch
It
that
is,
not that long
if it's
ago.
not out, it is coming out.
Yeah, get ready.
It's so good.
If you can't find it, wait longer.
just go back to the website, press F5, spoilers, it'll be there.
Refresh it every hour.
All right, so let's move on to entertainment.
Yeah.
I want to hear what your favorite scenes are, or favorite scene,
Oh, I like
or
the
your
scene.
favorite moment, I guess.
I like the scene with him and
Catherine Zeta-Jones.
yeah, when they're like and he
In the stable?
yeah, in the stable.
Yeah, you would like that.
I do like that.
Who doesn't like that?
Every adolescent boy.
It was a formative, a core memory for me. It was no, the reason I like that scene beyond the obvious ones is that like I think the flirting that happens between Antonio Banderas
great.
and her is like so believable and
Yeah.
so good. But then also like to go even further to my entertainment score, like my entertainment thoughts is like I was very entertained with this movie because of the way Antonio Banderas interacted with her, his interactions with the Captain Love,
Yeah.
and with Antonio or
Anthony Hopkins.
Anthony Hopkins,
Yeah.
all of those dynamics, like the student-teacher dynamic, the villain dynamic, and her had very interesting scenes.
Well, and
right?
they're all mutually exclusive compartments of his
Yeah.
character. They're not. It's not like he's bleeding over into one or the other because he has very obviously clearly different relationships with
Yeah.
each one. And because of that, like even whenever he's in disguise and he's talking with Captain Love, it's a very different
Yes.
feel than what it is when he's in disguise.
Like-
Talking even with Don Raphael or Elena.
yeah, the scene in his office when he puts the jar on the
Oh,
table.
that's such a good scene.
Like that's a perfect example of that dynamic, right? And then the scene when not the first training montage, but the one where he's like he loses it on Anthony
Vega.
Hopkins,
Yeah.
and he's like, I'm gonna do my own thing.
Yeah.
And then like they have that, and then more training, and like I don't know, all of it. It's just the dynamics with Antonio Banderas and other actors was great.
So the thing I really like about that fight in the stable with Elena is one, it really shows both of their stubbornness and their characters, and it also gives us one scene to show that she is actually very good at the sword.
Right, yeah.
And she's capable enough to be someone that he can rely on whenever the time comes.
And not just a damsel in distress.
Yes, exactly.
Kind of
and I think that's why I like her character so much. It's because she's not a damsel in distress.
She's got a lot of fire. Like even at the table with the Dons, right? She's got some pushback there. So I really liked the sequence right after that when he dances with her.
Yes,
because he's like his one objective for the night is when the Dons leave the table, you need to be in that room. You need to be invited. He's like, I didn't get invited. I need to make a scene. Hello, pretty lady.
How do I make a scene?
You can listen here, Don Raphael. You can choose to go into that room without me and leave me here with your daughter. Or you can take me into this room.
Yeah. Well, and clearly it works, and it's a very good Paramount to like, I guess just him thinking on his feet and trying to figure out the best way. And he's like, the only leverage I got is I'm attractive.
What if this is a win-win?
There's at the end of that scene, it's really funny. On the side, there's like this lady. She's an extra, and it looks like she's like, okay, can I cut in? Are you done with him? Can I get
done? I'm ready to dance.
She's got this like, I'm next, right? Dibs.
I'm on the card.
I'm first in line. I'm the closest.
So probably mine, and this was, I feel, kind of obvious, but the essentially after he steals the map, after he finds out where it is, and you have the sword fight in the hallway that subsequently moves into the courtyard, and just that section
whole sequence is great.
Just phenomenal. It's so much fun because you have one great sword play, you have just you have a multifaceted section of like attacks, essentially, whenever, because you have like Captain Love, who's a very different fighting style than Don Raphael. Yeah. And then you have Antonio Banderas trying to just defend the best way he can and escape.
Well, and each set piece has a different like dynamic. It's like a little puzzle piece of like, okay, so this section's like this, and he's figured out this, and here's how he gets away from him here. And then the hallway was different because this, and then you have the fight with Love that then spills into the fight with both of them.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
Yeah, I also really like that. Not to go back to Ryan's favorite scene, but the sword fight in the stable. Yeah, because like it's very flirtatious, right? Yeah, and it's easy to be like, man, he's totally just kind of like maybe a little taking advantage of it here. Yeah, but at the same time, he's already was in the confessional and heard her confess. Yeah, that she's like, oh, I'm interested in this rogue. And he's like, well, how far can I take this?
Yeah. Well, and at the same time, too, like, it does work, essentially, like, what he does, it does work as a distraction to stop other people from chasing him once he leaves the stable. Right. In some form or fashion. And one other scene that I really like about this film, I love the opening scene of basically of
like in the big
courtyard, in the big square of De La Vega, like just being the classic Zorro, right? And
it's good that we get to see that classic Zorro in the intro.
He does that bit too, like with the whip, where he pulls the whole firing squad. Out of line and
the guns like domino.
Shoots the sergeant.
Yeah, it's great.
That was a good sequence.
It doesn't make any sense for the people that are shooting the guns.
Not really, but it's still
cool. It works for me.
It's all I really needed out of that.
Well, and it does a great job of showing that Alejandro and his brother idolize Zorro. Yeah. So we know that the second that Alejandro figures out that the old crippled man that just beat him up is actually Zorro. Is going to be a completely different dynamic than what it was, and it's going to help open his eyes a little bit.
And it also gives a reason for Anthony Hopkins to actually recruit him. Yes. Because he had the whole line about, like, you helped me a long time ago, and I can help you now, kind of thing. Like, there's a reason for him to actually be like, okay, well,
instead of just like,
he's at a
some
low point,
drunk.
But like at some point, this kid was good and helpful and willing to get in and mix it up, right? Yeah. So something we haven't really hit on as much here is there's a lot of really good comedy mixed in.
There is.
With everything else. And specifically with Banderas in disguise and Captain Love. Yeah. bits where the problem is I cannot come up with what the line actually is, where he says something like, well, you embarrassed me. Oh, and I'm sure it will happen many times, or something like that.
yeah.
As he's like, kind of like as an aside, where it's almost like I was apologizing. And then Captain Love kind of does that like side eye thing. Where he's like, wait a minute.
That wasn't an apology.
That wasn't an apology. And then also the scene between the two of them with the jarred, the head wine.
Mm-hmm, head wine.
The head wine.
Oh, when he drinks it at the end. I'm like,
well, it's such a savage move too, right? Because you just like, you know what, commit to the bit.
Yep.
And like, if I'm going to convince this guy, I got to go.
But I was trying to figure out in 1810 what kind of fluid would they have put a head in to suspend it?
Spirits.
You think so?
Yeah,
So it was probably
essentially.
Okay.
Yeah. So one of my favorite lines of the whole film,
Doesn't matter. It's still head sauce.
Still had a head in it. Yeah. Like it doesn't make it better.
It's when so basically time skip before Alejandro's brother is dead, and they're basically going to the Spanish outpost to
with three-fingered Jack.
Yeah, three-fingered Jack.
Yeah.
And the one of the Spanish officers does something, and he's like, "Don't touch my brother," and he has a gun to his head. I'm like, I thought you were tied up. That's because you were stupid.
Yes.
Yeah. And then I loved them just running away with all of them tied in a circle, naked to the
facing
cactus.
the cactus. Like, ooh.
Yeah.
Woof.
There's a lot of good humor.
Yeah, there is. There's a lot of like little good bits in there.
Well, also, I mean, you almost have kind of like a bit of like a proto Johnny Depp Pirates of the Caribbean move.
A little bit.
In his first fight in the barracks.
Mm-hmm.
So he beats the big dude with the cannonballs.
He spits all those teeth out.
And he spits all the teeth out and collapses, and then all the guys turn and look, and he's just there with the torch with the cannon, like, hello,
he's
boys.
ready to go.
It's very much so Looney Tunes. Like that could be if that was Bugs Bunny, I wouldn't have blinked. You know, it wouldn't have made me pause. But then also like the cask with the gunpowder coming out, where he's running, he looks behind him, he's just dragging it with him.
Yeah, it's following.
It's very much so feels kind of like like Disney watched that and we're like, Johnny can do this.
Yeah. Well, and I really do feel that Pirates of the Caribbean, the first one, was towards the end of like kind of that pulp fiction.
That's probably the closest we've gotten to this kind of movie in a long time.
It was basically once that had all of its success and they started making the sequels to it, that it moved from being the pulpy edge to something
because then
else.
they tried to expand the universe to add more stuff in there.
They
it's
overcomplicated
we don't need it.
No.
Just give us bone simple
Give me the
plot.
first Pirates of the Caribbean over and over and over.
Oh, man. All right. So that sounds like we're kind of winding down here. But before we go, we have to talk about and chill about Patreon, because that is what we do.
Ryan doesn't like
Such
that
a
word.
negative
Ryan doesn't like that
connotation.
word.
No, I'm going to hammer it down. That's what
You
we do.
get such a good value for $1.
It is a really good value.
Yeah, it's not shilling. We're giving this away for $1.
But yeah, so for $1 measly, you can get access to all of our previous bonus episodes.
All
One
of it
comes out every single month, guaranteed. Sometimes more, we don't know. We also have movie commentaries that you can listen along. Movie theater, movie science. Theater,
Mystery Science
Theater.
3000.
3000 style.
Yep, and then we also have Patreon Picks Polls, where you get to choose what we review.
Yep.
Which Patreons get early access for that, and then it'll eventually hit the main feed.
Yep.
But if for whatever reason you don't want to give us $1, that is totally fine.
If it's too much, we understand.
Yep.
It's trying times out there.
Sure is.
But you can really help us out if you want to leave us a review on whatever podcast provider of your choice you listen to.
Follow us on Spotify.
Follow us on socials.
Follow us on social.
Like, share, comment on our posts. Any of that kind of stuff helps bubble us up in the algorithm and gets us in front of more eyes and more ears.
And just share us with your friends. Text somebody, email them, write it down on their notebook and don't tell them.
Send a fax.
Put it in their Trapper Keeper.
Yeah.
Trapper Keeper.
Do a... What's it called on Apple where you can like cast something? AirDrop our podcast to some random stranger on a plane. Do whatever you got to do. Let's get the word out there.
So we appreciate all of the support. And that does sound like all the time we have this week. So until next time, I'm Andrew.
I'm Ryan.
And I'm Steven.
And every spoiler was intended.